103, under -125. Eric, talk to me about the Bills.
Yeah, this is a situation where it's much like Baltimore, where when I look at that organization, I think to myself that this is a very smart team. They built the defense from back to front, right, with the Tre'Davious White, Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer. Even the linebacker position is more of a coverage group than it is a run thumping group. They get Evan Espineza in the draft, who I think is a good player. And what I like the most about this is, when you have a young quarterback, the worst thing that you can do is leave it ambiguous as to whether or not he's good. And the Bills are not in that position. You go, Smoke Brown. They had Stephon Diggs, Cole Beasley, a pretty good offensive line, and a good play caller, I think. So if Josh Allen stinks, we're going to find out relatively soon. But there's a good chance, given where he was drafted and some of the improvements that he had last season, that he won't be bad and he'll be good enough to win a weak division. I don't necessarily know though if it's tough, because I look at him from his traits perspective, and I think he can be that kind of quarterback that might not be able to cross the street a million times to get to the end zone, but be able to go over the top. But he was the least accurate quarterback in the NFL a season ago on deep passes. So his accuracy really does. I think, scare me a little bit, as far as betting on him for some of those tail events like Super Bowl, conference, and stuff like that. But as far as their win total of 9, as far as AFC East, I think I like, weirdly, AFC East more than I like the win total of 9. But they're not a bad bet to take that division for the first time since like the mid 90s.
Yeah, I think that when they were plus 160, I thought that was one of the best bets. I mean, the Patriots were plus 21 in turnover differential last year. Like, you can't even fathom how good that is, and it's how unsustainable and non-sticky that is from year to year. So I think the Bills have a really good chance to unseat the Patriots this year. Evan, 9 wins for the Bills this year. What do you think?
Over. And Eric said this year we're going to find out if Josh Allen stinks. It's going to be tough for us to find out if Josh Allen stinks when he wins the freaking MVP. So, the Bills are in a really good spot, I think. Again, a team that has a ton of continuity. Sean McDermott, obviously running the defense, he's back. Offensively, Brian Daboll, he's coming back. They entered the draft. They really didn't have many holes. I mean, they were one of the least neediest teams entering the draft, and they didn't have a first-round pick, and they still came out of the second round with A.J. Epinesa, which I think that if you were going to name a need for the Bills, it probably would have been pass rusher opposite Jerry Hughes. And they also picked up Mario Addison, who's got like 9 sacks in like 4 straight seasons, and is going to have scheme familiarity. He comes from Carolina. They love to pick up ex-Carolina players, which usually is not a strategy that I love, but it has worked out for them. Just picking up the guys that they have a lot of familiarity with, Brandon Beane in the front office and Sean McDermott as the head coach formerly of Carolina. I like their strategy toward building around Josh Allen. I mean, they went all out last offseason, changed like the offensive line, where they bring in like 11 new offensive linemen or something ridiculous like that via the draft and free agency. Threw a bunch of darts at the offensive line, and I think that they wound up with an average to above average offensive line, which was a big step forward from the previous years. They signed John Brown, they signed Cole Beasley, and then they didn't stop there. Like Trubisky, Josh Allen gets a lot of comparisons to Trubisky.
That's a Freudian slip, by the way.
Josh Allen gets a lot of comparisons to Mitchell Trubisky, but one big difference. So you remember how Trubisky took a big step forward from, at least from a production standpoint. I know that he still like threw into crowds way too much and all that, and got away with a lot of interceptions and all that. And he still, he didn't magically become accurate. And Josh Allen is not going to magically become accurate. But from year 1 of Trubisky to year 2, in between there, the Bears went all out toward upgrading the supporting cast around him. And you saw results from that. The Bears stopped after that. The Bears did not. The Bears, I guess they thought they had made it. You know, they brought in 10 kickers. They thought they were a kicker away from, you know, building a dynasty. And I mean, it was just an embarrassing approach from them. And they did not continue to add to the supporting cast of Mitchell Trubisky, and he plateaued and even regressed in his third season. The Bills did not stop there. They went out and they traded a first rounder and you know, some additional late round picks for Stephon Diggs. And I mean, I think that can be a huge difference maker. And instead of asking Josh Allen to elevate the players around him, they're like, we're going to have the players around Josh Allen elevate him. And, you know, the rushing production, I feel like often goes overlooked when Josh Allen gets hammered. We know that he's going to make wild plays. We know that he's going to be inaccurate, but his rushing production has been as good as any scrambling quarterback over the last 2 seasons. He leads all NFL quarterbacks in rushing touchdowns over the past 2 years. Obviously, he's been really productive from an efficiency standpoint. But how do you weigh that into your evaluation of Josh Allen, Eric? I know that you're almost certainly more down on Josh Allen than I am.
Yeah, it's a great point, and I think to your issue about Trubisky, it wasn't just that they didn't put players around Trubisky. It was they stopped building an offense that was conducive to him being successful. In 2018, Trubisky ran the football pretty well, and they used him in some designed runs. They used him a lot in the RPO game. And they built a system where a lot of open throws happened. And last season, it looked as though when you watch some of the games, I specifically think about the Rams game where they benched him at the end. It felt like Matt Nagy was trying to prove a point to management that he wasn't good enough to run a quote real offense. And you know, when I look at Josh Allen with the Bills, if the Bills don't do that, if they still build a system where Allen is running and doing, designed runs and obviously allowing him to scramble and not forcing him to sort of be, quote, a real quarterback too quickly, then I think he can avoid some of the pitfalls that Trubisky had. The main similarity between the two is however you measure it. So we'll chart ball accuracy, for example, on a couple of gradations. So like accuracy plus is like a perfect back shoulder throw. Accurate is, in stride. Catchable, inaccurate is sort of a throw where a guy has to go down for it, but it's still catchable. And catchable, uncatchable, inaccurate. Allen last season, I know he improved from a turnover standpoint and he improved from a completion percentage standpoint, but even like the second half of the season, he was still the quarterback that produced uncatchable, inaccurate throws the most frequently among all the quarterbacks in the NFL. And so season to season, how a quarterback does at limiting negative plays or producing them is pretty stable season to season. And that's what we saw with Trubisky in 2018. And that's what we saw with Allen in 19. If he can improve on that and the Bills still lean into the things that are conducive for young quarterbacks like him and Trubisky to have success, I think that they can have a ton of success. If they don't, if they say to themselves, okay, well, we need Josh to play more like Brady or we need Josh to play more like Mahomes, they're going to be left wanting more. And I don't think that that's as likely with the Bills because I think they're a smarter team than the Bears, but there's still that little bit there where if they take away some of the things that he does well that are unique to him, they might struggle.
You just got to give it up, Evan. Analytics Twitter is never going to be on the Josh Allen train. He's going to win the MVP, and Analytics Twitter is going to be like, Josh Allen. Josh Allen stinks. Okay. I mean, I'm just in it for fantasy, and obviously Josh Allen's way, way, way better fantasy player. Very big, very good fantasy player, way better than real life. Okay. Let's talk about the Cardinals. This is super interesting because the market is getting hotter on the Cardinals. I know some people were talking this week about how Kyler Murray's odds to win the MVP have dropped from around 50-1 to around 20. I've even seen some 16-1 on Kyler Murray, which is crazy to me at least, because typically MVP candidates need to win between at least 11 games, and you want them to win 12, 13, 14 games to have a real shot to win the MVP. I don't think the Cardinals, sitting here with a 7-win total in their range of outcomes, wins 12 games more than maybe 1 or 2% of the time. Eric, talk to me about Cardinals. As I mentioned, 7 minus 110 on both sides.
Yeah, this is an interesting one where I think if you shop around, you're going to get a pretty good value because I personally like 7 over. here. My projections are sort of more around 7.3, but there are other places, and we talked about this on our show, there are other places where 7.5 is the number, and it's not juiced all that much towards the under. In fact, if you look at like Bet Online, 7.5, the over is minus 120. So this is an example of where shopping around can get you some pretty good prices, depending upon what you prefer. I'm very much on them on being an improved team. I think they had, if you count DeAndre Hopkins, I think they had the best draft in the NFL in terms of adding value that will be a force multiplier for their team. Their schedule, is tricky with the NFC West. But their off division stuff is fairly reasonable. So, Kingsbury has done a good job. He improved them from, they were the worst team in yards per play in 2018 by like half a yard, and they were all the way basically into like the low 20s last year. If they have an improvement like that, Seattle is probably going to be down a little bit just based on noise alone. The Rams, I think, are fundamentally worse than a season ago, and I think the Niners will regress at least a little bit. There's some opening for the Cardinals. And I think if you're going to get 7 as their win total, I think over is the only way you can go.
I think one of the biggest questions for the Cardinals this offseason is evident is how can they implement a lack of continuity between DeAndre Hopkins and Kyler Murray and whatever other changes they want to implement in year 2. What do you think about Cardinals at 7?
Yeah, I don't have a strong stance on this team, but I do completely agree with Eric that if you're going to bet them at 7, I mean, I think you're definitely taking the over. You're not betting them to win 5 or 6. So, and I think that they're going to be improved, but I think that that's a concern not only from a win total perspective, but also from a fantasy perspective. How is DeAndre Hopkins? Is he going to be able to jump right in? And I mean, the way that DeAndre Hopkins wins is not necessarily with, tons and tons of separation, right? So there has to be a trust factor that is developed between him and Kyler Murray. I think he's going to be playing on the outside, like, certainly primarily and maybe like at a 90% clip, because I think that Fitzgerald is obviously going to be in the slot. And then when they go 4 wide, I think that Kirk is probably going to go into the slot before Hopkins does. So, I don't know. Like, I'm definitely going to be below consensus on DeAndre Hopkins from a fantasy standpoint. I'm not sure, because I just think that at the end of the day, like, pulling out Keyshawn Johnson or Damiere Byrd and dropping DeAndre Hopkins into that spot, I mean, that has to be just a colossal upgrade, even if DeAndre Hopkins doesn't really come anywhere close to meeting expectations in the box score this year.
Yeah, I'm probably going to stay away from this one too, just because I really like a side on the Rams, which I'm going to get to in a minute. And so you can get exposure to some of these division teams that are in the same division by making bets on the other side. We'll talk about that when we get to the Rams. I want to talk about the Bucs because this is super interesting. I mean, ESPN and the national media and all the Tom Brady freaks are so excited about the Bucs, and their odds to win all kinds of stuff have absolutely plummeted. Their win total has skyrocketed up to 10 wins for Tampa Bay Bucs. Minus 110 on both sides. Now, I think, obviously the reason that the people are betting it is because of Tom Brady. I think the offense is going to be so much better. You're going to turn the ball over 30 less times than Jameis Winston. I get all that. I don't think people are factoring in that the Bucs have a way underrated defense. And without Jameis Winston and Ryan Fitzpatrick in there throwing pick sixes and putting them in horrible spots, the defense is actually going to look pretty good. That said, whenever the public gets super, super high on a team and you go to a bar and everybody's talking about how good the Bucs are going to be, that's when I want to be under. It's just all the donkeys are all over the Bucs. So it's not a very mathematical way to approach it, Eric. It's just a feel thing. But what do you think about the Bucs at 10?
No, I think you're on the right track here. Maybe if it, back when they were being dealt at 9.5, over could have been a good play. I think now that it's at 10, it's hard for me to bet a 10 over for a team that's been around for a long time, that has been good for a long time in a season win total, let alone a team. You're absolutely right about their defense. They were a top, I think, top 10 team in expected points allowed. They were a top 10 team in yards per play allowed. They bring back a lot of pretty good players. They get Antoine Winfield from Minnesota in the draft, which I think really helps them. They drafted a ton of defense, a ton of coverage in the last few years, and I think that really helps them. Todd Bowles is a great defensive coordinator. But the issue is there's a chance that Brady last season was the product of a bad system and a bad supporting cast.